Hey there everyone, and welcome to more DnD Horror Story Cringe. In today's episode, we have a tale of a that guy that manages to stay in a group for multiple campaigns for 4 years, and a story about a player that has an unhealthy obsession. But before we get into those, here is Alice the cat with an important message. Thanks, Alice. Y'all should listen to her, or she will get fussy. But with that said, let's get right into the cringe. Simp with a Knife by Reddit user C. Ruios. Hi everyone. Today I'll share my story with you guys on how a player in my campaign got too obsessive. A short introduction. It was DM, myself, Rogue, the big problem player, Paladin, a nice guy who has been my friend for years now, Druid, a somewhat new player to D&D who became the Rogue's obsession, Monk and Wizard, fellow friends of mine and Paladins who are pretty chill, and Bard, Druid's best friend who is familiar with D&D. This story took place before the entire COVID stuff, so we were able to play at our local game store. Personally, I had been a DM for years then, and was known to run campaigns in the same fantasy world all the time. This lured out a lot of interest throughout the store, as they knew all the stories would connect in some sort of way. I loved being able to provide this kind of content for so many different people, and the owner of the store knew this. So when Druid and Bard came into the store looking for a D&D campaign, the owner quickly checked up with me. I was just about to start up a new campaign 2 days later together with Paladin, Monk, and Wizard, so I figured it would be a nice addition to our game. The first few sessions were great, as the party seemed to have a strong and fun dynamic, but looking at me now, posting this here, you can already guess that this wasn't going to go by undisturbed. The day of session 6 arrives, and we were about to get ready for our weekly fun, but the door to our little room opens. The store owner appeared together with some random guy, asking us if he could join. We all agree, but aren't prepared for what this dude is up to. He introduced himself and asked for help with his character creation while he took a seat next to Druid. I offered to help him, but he quickly spoke up. "Can't she just help me? She's right next to me, and you can continue while we work on it." He was referring to Druid, but she was still new herself. After explaining that to him, and telling him that Paladin would be better at it, he seemed a little annoyed. Eventually, he manages to get the character filled out, and I start us off. The party was getting back from a well-earned victory, and went back to the tavern to celebrate. They were all having a blast, and Druid managed to get really into her character. After a few drinks, I introduced Rogue as a small fan to the newly rising party of warriors. Everything went fine, and he seemed to fit in, but when Druid got a little flirty with Paladin, he seemed to change all of a sudden. He was more hostile towards Paladin, but was able to mask it as his drunken character. Now, I'm all open to player romance and conflicts, but I made sure to tell them both that I wasn't planning a focus on a love triangle at the end of the session. A few sessions go by, and everyone seems to enjoy themselves. There were some small conflicts between the two of them, but it didn't escalate. After being too annoyed with Rogue, Paladin decides to drop the romance between him and Druid, which led to a pretty beautiful roleplay moment between Druid and Paladin, but opened up a doorway to Rogue's creepy obsession. By now, the party became a family who had to overcome a lot of fights, even one between them and a different party who had other goals than they did. This was actually one of the coolest D&D moments I have ever done. But besides all the fights, there was place for romance from time to time. Paladin and Bard found each other both in and out of game. Monk and Wizard, who are both straight in real life, decided to out-romance the couple, which led to a lot of laughs, but also well-done roleplay moments. Unfortunately for Druid, this made Rogue think that they were destined to be. Now, they did flirt from time to time, but I noticed that Druid wasn't going to stick with it at all. So I just told Rogue respectfully that he should knock it off. I thought he was understanding the reason behind this, but oh boy, was I wrong. The party was trying to get into a rather chic inn, and it wasn't working at all. They only had one option left, and that was to persuade their way in there. It was Druid who took the lead, as Bard wasn't present for the session. Now, I have to say that when she tried to talk her way in, I did personally feel an attraction to her. Both me and Druid had become rather close friends the last few months, and I might have let my personal feelings get in the way. The session passed by great, and I felt satisfied with the results. That all changed when Rogue suddenly sent me a message, later that night, about how he wants me to stop picking favorites. I was shocked by this, as I wasn't aware that he felt that way, and I personally did not like how I handled it either. I was told by Paladin that Rogue had been harassing him before too. When he flirted with Druid, Rogue was sending him messages about ruining his chance with her, and how he was taking the fun out of the game for everyone. This eventually just made him drop the romance with Druid. I had no idea that stuff like that was going on, but Paladin told me he just wanted to keep it to himself to reduce the drama outside of the game. It was only now that Rogue was sending me this stuff that he spoke up about it. I took a few weeks off, as I had no idea how to handle things just yet. Eventually, we get back to the story where the party is in the tavern of the inn that they got into. I put the same NPC that Druid flirted with to get in there around them as he was done with his shift. Druid gets up to him, and they end up dancing to the songs that the bard performed for the crowd. Everyone is enjoying themselves except for Rogue, who just watched Druid from a distance. She ends up seducing him, and I let her roll one more time before I would cut to black. Now, at this point, we were eating in real life, and Rogue was eating a pizza when he straight up tells Druid not to roll the die. She was a little weirded out, but tried to reach for her die, but was stopped by him as he stabbed her hand with the steak knife that he used to cut pieces out of his pizza. Filled by complete shock, we all stood there, before Druid screamed throughout the entire game store. Realizing what he had just done, Rogue decides to bolt out of the room, with Monk and Wizard chasing after him, while me, Paladin, and Bard check up on Druid. Apparently, Wizard had managed to tackle Rogue and keep him down, while the store owner called the police and an ambulance for Druid. 2 years later, and both me and Druid are happily together, and we still play D&D with the rest of our group. She has a scar on her left-hand palm, and I promised that I'd get a tattoo like her scar down the line. For Rogue, we heard that he had to do community service, but we hope to never see him again. Well, when I read the title of this story, I was expecting a player to be simping through the game, and that the knife would come into play through roleplay. I wasn't expecting an obsessive player to actually stab someone over flirting with a make-believe character, but here we are. There's definitely something wrong with Rogue upstairs to be this obsessive to the point of actually committing assault on someone. What was he expecting to happen? He'd stab her hand and she would look over at him and say that that was what she was waiting for and kiss him? Some people are just crazy, and if I were OP and Druid, I would look into getting a restraining order on Rogue. As someone that does something like he did is a huge red flag for possible future interactions if you're not careful. With someone that gets to the point of doing something like that, that obsession is not likely to die off easily. Hopefully, they don't ever see him again. And before we get into the next story, remember, if you have a story that you would like to be shared in a video, be sure to post it to the D&D Doge subreddit, post a link in the comments, or even at me on Twitter. Now let's get into today's final story. The Giga Chat of Problem Players, by Reddit user CreditObvious9945. Today I made my first Reddit account to respond to another person's post, so I decided to indulge y'all in the worst problem player I've constantly been dealing with for the past 4 years, because every time he does something stupid, he just kisses ass until he thinks the person is no longer mad at him. This individual has the worst qualities a person can have in my opinion. He's controversial, hot-headed, aggressive, and slimy. Thankfully, this all occurred over Roll20 and not in real life. The Forever DM, Campaign 1. I joined this campaign pretty late, my first time playing 5e, about halfway through maybe, so I'm not sure about his behavior before my joining, but from what I've heard, he was very chill and even sacrificed his character with some bomb to save everyone. Cut to me joining, and he makes his first ever rogue, the literal Doomsday Starter. His playstyle as a rogue during this campaign was very annoying for other players in the DM. He is prone to leave in the middle of combat to loot the monster den or enemy hideout if he loses any health. This got highly annoying, especially when he wouldn't split the loot, and ended up having 4k gold while the rest of the party, 5 other people, had 1.5k. Eventually, the DM TPKs us while we were trying to loot some castle that the problem player and fighter wanted to rob. However, the DM wasn't even at fault, as the problem player himself ended up being the one to TPK us. Remember that I said that he sacrificed himself to save the party with an earlier character? Well, he tried to do the same thing this time as well. However, the DM was trying to prevent any more "haha, I just kill my new characters every time we have a hard fight," and gave him a literal nuke instead of a typical bomb. So the problem player knew full well that if he used this nuke, it would kill the entire party, and went ahead with it anyways. He then proceeded to insult the DM for the next 4 years about him creating an unwinnable encounter. Yeah, he's that kind of person. Well, I definitely wouldn't say that it wasn't the DM's fault at all. He obviously knew how this player was, and still gave him the ability to destroy the entire party. But let's keep going. The Forever DM, Campaign 2. Okay, Campaign 2 was awful. I won't lie, the DM was trying a lot of new stuff, so I barely remember anything the problem player did, as I was angrier at the DM than anyone else. However, the moments that stood out to me were: he only plays rogues and does the same stuff from Campaign 1. He and the DM outed one of our only female players. She would always roleplay as slutty characters, and the DM was celibate because of familial reasons, which she knew bothered him when he would have to roleplay his NPCs while she was trying to push his buttons. So eventually, he just started trying to kill off all of her characters intentionally. He also did something similar to our power gamer after she left, which was annoying. The problem player was charmed by this girl and would go out of his way to talk to her. They became pretty close friends, but eventually she got a boyfriend in real life, and he decided that it was time to ask her out by sending a link to a Discord server with a bunch of poems that he wrote for her. I didn't even know this happened until a few months after, because I heard the gossip from a mutual friend. He was a super incel the entire time towards her and the other girls in our friend groups outside of the D&D games. Eventually, I brought my ex into the group, not realizing how big of an incel he became throughout this campaign. To preface this, I have him permamuted, or volume at the lowest on Discord. But while she and I were playing another game on the Discord server, he said some pretty questionable things about my ex's little sister, who was a minor, supposedly as a joke. Naturally, we did not take kindly to what he said, and he refused to apologize until a day later when he finally realized that he messed up, and thankfully never talked about anything like that to anyone on that server again. The last thing I remember was I had some permanent injury which gave me a 50% chance of losing my turn for around 3 sessions, because a kobold pulled out a fireball scroll and rolled max damage on me. Eventually, when we got to town, someone was willing to do surgery on me, costing around 3,000 gold. Unfortunately, I needed 500 gold for the surgery, and had to do a loan with 20% interest per session with the problem player for him to cough up the gold after borrowing gold from the other players already. While that guy was still annoying in this chapter, I have to say again that the DM was most at fault here. He was the one that allowed this to happen, and while the female player that purposely did the sexual roleplay parts because she knew it bothered DM is messed up, the DM didn't have to follow through with any of it, and just state that there would be no erotic roleplay. This is why Session Zeros are so crucial. But let's continue. My homebrew mini-campaign. My first time DMing, I did a little Eldritch-inspired campaign where my characters went to a D&D-ified Innsmouth from the H.P. Lovecraft story, The Shadow over Innsmouth. Supposedly, everybody had fun, although it was a little roleplay light, and it was around 5 sessions long, but the problem player did stuff that ticked me the wrong way. I made encounters based around the characters' backstories, so in the case of the Ranger, he had to fight his worst fear with the party, which was this wolf who killed his family. I touched it up a bit to fit the town's theme and threw it at them. Eventually, when they killed it, I thought it would be cute if it dropped a magic item, resembling a trophy version of the wolf's head, meant for the Ranger. So, as everyone discusses who it should go to, the problem player picks it up from the floor and starts to say, "Mine, mine," as a Hexblade Warforged Warlock. So, eventually, the party convinces him that it belongs to the Ranger, and him, feeling pressured, ends up throwing the magic item into a well, hoping that it would be lost or destroyed. After the Ranger quickly picked it up from the bucket that the magic item fell into, the problem player spent the rest of that session sulking and quiet. There was a whole homebrew gimmick of giving into your inner demons or some eldritch force for power, which was supposed to have this kind of ominous trade your sanity for power theme. But instead, the problem player, anytime it came up, would repeatedly scream "Zaza" in the middle of my descriptions, and would not stop even after I gave him an entire minute so he could tire himself out. He then would send everyone, even me, messages and memes clearly showing that he did not care about the descriptions, something that he regularly does. My homebrew campaign. Wuxia-inspired high fantasy world. We are literally on session 2, so not much to say, besides I spend a lot of time prepping, and the players say that they're having fun. He's very light on roleplay, and only roleplays when he can either rob someone or scam them out of money, even though, according to him, I optimized my character to be a super skill monkey for roleplay purpose. Anyways, the fighter, who is the face of the party and does most of the roleplay, wants to pick up blacksmithing. I had already written down in my campaign settings that there are WoW-like profession systems in this campaign, so I was like, sure, you can train to be a blacksmith, you can become one. I didn't know the shitstorm that this would cause, as the problem player then proceeded to vehemently refuse, saying that this goes against all D&D rules, that the fighter should only be valid for combat, and that he's trying to steal his character's entire gimmick. I was left astounded, mouth agape, and just moved on with the session while ignoring him, as we were running short on time already. After the session, I messaged him asking how the fighter learning blacksmith runs over his mastermind rogue toes. He then proceeded to rules lawyer that in D&D you can only get skills and proficiency from your class and background. As he spent so much time engineering his character to have as many skills as possible, it was unfair for others to learn skills or proficiencies. Again, I was left astounded, pulled up Xanathar's guide, and sent him pictures of downtime activities. I then spent too much time arguing back and forth with him over 2 days when, first, this is not my job, second, I'm the DM, and third, it was my homebrew campaign, where it was explicitly written, pre-session 0, that it was possible to learn professions. TLDR, the problem player that uses bootlicking to stay in our campaigns continues to suck the fun out of D&D campaigns. Yeah, that guy definitely sounds like a lot to handle. Though a lot of it is from the DMs not stopping this behavior by confronting that guy about it. When that guy started acting up in OP's games, he should have told him to cut it out right then and there, instead of just hoping that he would tire himself out and stop. Then with the second homebrew, when that guy started arguing with OP about the Xanathar downtime system, I would have told him that if he doesn't like it, he doesn't have to play. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't they all just kick this dude out instead of keeping him in the group for 4 years? Well, OP later stated in the comments of the post that Fighter and that guy are close friends, but that Fighter also has had enough of that guy at this point, and if he continues acting that way, he's fine with kicking him now. So, hopefully, they can have a talk with that guy, and he will change his behavior. If not, well, then I'd say it's time to say goodbye, at least to D&D. Godspeed, OP, and good luck. Sounds like you're gonna need it. And that will do it for today. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may you never run into a player like the ones in these stories. Until next time.